In the upper right corner of the report selection step, you'll notice this large button labeled Report Configurations. Now, what's that for? Before we look at that specifically, let's talk a little bit about how DVAAPBase keeps track of the settings that you select for your reports. Now, while you're working in DVAAPBase choosing reports, setting up their various options, every selection you make is remembered by DVAAPBase. And not just the settings that you make for your reports, but also the settings of every DVAAPBase user. And these remembered settings are unique for each data set as well. What does that mean? Let's imagine that your company, there are two users who work in DVAAPBase, you and Wendy Smith. Let's also imagine that you've been using DVAAPBase for a couple of years now, and you have created a few data sets, one for the 2014 plan year, one for the 2015 plan year, and a third where you had copied one of these data sets to make some changes, maybe to see how the effects of a proposed layoff might look. So both you and Wendy are actively using these three data sets. You're producing various reports with different settings. While you're doing this, DVAAPBase remembers how you set up each report in each of those three data sets. In one data set, you might be grouping, let's say, the workforce report by job title, but in another data set, you might be running these reports by department. When you open those data sets, the report settings will be just as you left them the last time you ran that report. The same is true for Wendy. So DVAAPBase remembers her settings for each report in each data set as well. So you don't need to remember how you last ran a certain analysis. DVAAPBase does that for you. So what is this report configuration then? Often it's very useful to save all of the report settings that you've made in a particular data set. This is exactly what a report configuration is. It's a snapshot of all your current report settings. Saving a report configuration not only allows you to restore settings to a particular arrangement, but other users can also use the report configurations that you have saved. This makes it simple to reproduce the exact results of reports that are found, for instance, in your AAPs. So here's how this works. When you have a setup of one or more reports in a particular way that you want to save, you just click on the Report Configurations button, and that'll display the Report Configurations dialog. Now in the dialog, you can see there's a list of report configurations that have been saved for the current data set. The name of the user is also shown, and the date and time when the data set or data report configuration was saved. Now at the top, you can enter a name for the data set, or the report configuration you're saving. Let's call this tutorial config. And then you click the Save button. It tells me the report configuration is saved, and it appears at the top of the list here. So when you want to use a saved report configuration, you just select it from the list, and then click the Load button. It tells you that the report configuration was loaded. So now all of the settings that were saved in that report configuration now are applied to DVAAPBase. They're in place and ready to use. Now if you have a report configuration that you no longer need, you can also select it in the list here and click the Delete button. It confirms you're sure you want to delete that report configuration. Yes. And the report configuration is deleted. You probably notice a checkbox up here labeled Published. So what's that used for? Now in each data set, there is room for one report configuration that can be flagged as the published configuration. This is a special configuration, usually the one used to produce the final version of reports or an EAP. It's important to save this report configuration so you or other users can easily reproduce the results from that set of published reports. So when you have this report configuration in place, you just check the published checkbox before you save. So for instance, say the current configuration is what I'm using for my EAP. I'll save it as call it main config. You check the published box and click Save. It saves report configuration. And you'll notice in the list here, main config is now flagged as the published configuration. Now, if you make a correction or change to these published settings, for instance, say you found something in one of the reports that needed to be adjusted, so you change those settings and you publish that new set. You wanted to update this main configuration with those changes. So maybe I've made those changes and I want to say this is the corrected main config. I click published. I want this to be the new published configuration. I click save. Now DVAAPBase confirms that you want to replace the existing published configuration with this new one. I say yes. It's saved. You'll notice the old main configuration is no longer the published configuration. The new one is now the published configuration. Only one report configuration can be the published one at any time. The published report configuration is the only report configuration you can't delete. If I try to select the published configuration and delete it and try to confirm, it tells me 0 configurations have been deleted. It won't allow me to delete this configuration. That's because I want to make sure that this report configuration is never accidentally deleted, since it contains, in this case, the settings that I used in my AAP.